Welcome to this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Today we're talking all about Frank Wells. What if Frank Wells was able to stick around for Michael Eisner's last 10 years as CEO? Would things have been different? And what do we think about the prospect of a president position coming into the Walt Disney Company now? Similar to that of Frank Wells back then. Could it improve things? Would it push Bob Iger to be better? We'll see. We're going to talk about up next. I got the Italiano. I got Matthew Muir up next on the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show. So the Orange Nerd Show is basically everything except the theme park. So in this show, we talk about the studio, Star Wars, the MCU, all that good stuff. We talk a lot about the corporate side of things, which we're going to do today. So basically everything that doesn't involve the theme park. So that's the focus of this particular show. But before we get started, I want to introduce my panel. We got the Italiano. Welcome back, George.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be on here with you fellas and talking some shop. That's what we do here on OG 55. It's always a good time.
Yeah.
And but yeah, if you'd like to follow me on social media, you could do so on X, formerly known as what the heck am I saying? I'm sorry, folks. It's been a long day. I just got home from work, so please ignore me. Let's try that again, shall we? You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. Thank you, George. Matthew Muir, welcome back on the show, brother.
Thank you, OG.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure having Matthew Muir on the show. Now, he does have an Instagram, which I will be linking down below. Make sure you follow Matthew. Really passionate Disney fan. You definitely want to check out his Instagram. A lot of insights in regards to like the corporate side of things, especially. So make sure you check him out. He is family here at OG55. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. So Matthew, you brought up this topic to me. I think it's fantastic. Let's start off with the Michael Eisner era. So in your opinion, Matthew, like, let's just say, because, we all know Frank Wells, we lost him way too soon, right? In that helicopter crash, we lost him way too soon. So assuming that didn't happen, right? And he was able to see out the rest of the Michael Eisner era. In your opinion, Matthew, what do you think would have happened? Would the quality, because we just see, obviously, the last 10 years were not like the first 10 years, Do you think the trajectory would have been a little different if Frank Wells would have still been there?
It would almost certainly be more positive if Wells was still there. Now, this isn't to say that Wells was by any means perfect, because Euro Disney did happen on his watch. And also the first few direct-to-video sequels also happened under Wells. What may have happened, however, is he might have been able to monitor the critical reception of the first few sequels carefully and then pull the plug on them as was necessary. And he might have also been able to pour more investment into the American part in spite of the failure at Disneyland Paris.
Yeah, well said, well said. Yeah, I do think that it's not a coincidence that when he passed away, I believe it was in 1994, a few years after that, which it takes a little while to notice this stuff, right? Because this stuff is like we've talked about a lot on the channel, even with Bob Iger. The movies are in the pipeline for years and years and years and years, and theme park stuff is in the pipeline for years and years. But we started to see a downward trend, I would say like 96, 97, right? So about 3 or 4 years after we lost Wells, the quality started to dip. And by 2005, it was like full blown like Disney war, like Roy the nephew was trying to oust Michael Eisner, the whole thing. We had a lot of animated flops, like Chicken Little, Home on the Range. So things changed dramatically after he left. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, I'm not going to say that he, like you were saying, Matthew, the man isn't perfect. The man was not perfect, but I do think he played a huge role in the success of the Walt Disney Company during the Eisner era. And I think that if he would have stuck around, if he was able to see that out, There still would have been mistakes, obviously, like there always will be, but I think it would have fared a lot better. Frank Wells was a really brilliant human being. He seemed to really understand the Disney brand, and it's really unfortunate that we lost him as soon as we did. George, your thoughts on Frank Wells? I know you're passionate too, George, about like that 90s era and stuff. What if he was around for the last 10 years? Would it have been different?
Yeah, so for me, as you said, OG, I'm very passionate about the 90s era, the Renaissance era when it comes to Disney animation. Um, Eisner and Wells, they were like the power couple, if you will, as far as like running the Walt Disney Company. I mean, if it wasn't for them two, there was a high possibility that the Walt Disney Company was going to be taken under a hostile takeover and have the divisions divided into different entities and split off. And the Walt Disney Company may not be exactly how we see it even today, if it wasn't for Eisner and Wells. I mean, it was a tremendous loss just in general when Wells passed, not just as a person who ran Disney alongside Eisner, but just a great human being. You know, he brought so much of his own personality, even though he was the business side of it. But I mean, he understood Eisner, and Eisner understood him. And at the end of the day, it was like a partnership made in heaven, a perfect blend of coexisting together as a 50-50 partnership. Now, when Wells passed, mind you, too, as you had mentioned, OG, there was a lot, going on already in the pipeline for the parks and for the studio side. I feel like for me personally, once the Disney decade was over, around the time when Animal Kingdom was completed,
and that was 90.
That was 98. That was
okay.
98. Yeah.
That was it once Animal Kingdom opened.
Yeah. So around that time, that's when, Animal Kingdom was, great, but there was a lot of budget cuts where we seen, Beastly Kingdom that was supposed to go in, which no longer was on the table at the time. The Animal Kingdom opened. A lot of the Imagineers took those ideas, went over to Universal. That's where the Lost Continent came in with Dueling Dragons and the Flying Unicorn, and everything had went through. And then right at the end of the decade with the Renaissance era, Tarzan had just came out. Phenomenal movie, great soundtrack by Phil Collins, which I actually think was part of like the last part of like heighten of his career. But then that's when you started to see that kind of dip down. And I feel like not even just with Wells passing, but it also was the time where Eisner was going through his heart surgery. So you had two major happenings that happened to both of them. And honestly, they were much stronger together than separate, obviously. And I just think that so much was going on with Disneyland Paris, Eisner coming off of his surgery, losing Wells. Roy Disney, by that time, was not a fan, trying to convince the board to let Eisner go. And there was just so much going on at that time. But and I'm capping all this off. So to actually answer the original question, I feel like if Wells was still alive, I felt like it's the term of events would still happen, but maybe not as drastic, where they may have had a little bit more control because they still would have been doing it together, where Wells may have kind of convinced Roy Disney, let's work something out. Let's try. Because again, Wells was a business person. Yeah,
Wells understood it. He definitely understood it. And another thing that I think really impacted the Disney, even going into like the middle of the 90s and beyond, after Frank Wells' passing, was the loss of Howard Ashman. And I believe it was 1991. That's another tragic event that occurred. So you had Howard Ashman passing, a few years later, Frank Wells passing. So by then you lost two giants at Disney, just legends, absolute legends. So it really set the ball in motion. And on top of that, Katzenberg left. Remember that whole thing? He started DreamWorks.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on there. So, but yeah, I think that it would have been different though if Frank was still there. I think he was smart. I think he would have navigated that a little differently with Michael. Now, I want to ask you, Matthew, Disney right now, and they haven't for a long time, I believe ever since Bob Iger took over, if I'm not mistaken, they haven't replaced Frank Wells, like in terms of...
They haven't had a competent president at all, because what happened was, I think Iger was already president in 2000, which he retained after he became CEO, and he became chairman of the board sometime later. But after that, he actually abolished the president position outright. I'd be fine with him if he was CEO and chairman like Eisner was, but not without a competent president to keep him in check. And we haven't had a competent president at all since Wells. I mean, not even George Mitchell, who was president right at the end of the Eisner era, even he was a bit useless.
Yeah, no, 100%. We haven't had that. We haven't had that role. Go ahead, George.
Sorry, and I just wanted to add another thing in too. As far as what the animation goes too, when you had mentioned OG about like in the later 2000s with like Chicken Little, Home on the Range, and I even have to say, and I'm not saying that these are bad films because these are 3 films that I absolutely love, but in the public's eye compared to other animation, they didn't do so hot, which is Atlantis, Treasure Planet, and Emperor's New Groove. But I absolutely love those films. They're all very different. But again, it just the lightning didn't strike in the bottle. And I also think too, while all this was going on at Disney, Pixar was hitting their stride.
Right.
They were at the height of the career with John Lasseter, Ed Catmull, Steve Jobs. Like they were getting hit after hit, and the public domain was getting used to that computer CGI animation. Right. So I just think it was the unfortunate events of, again, with Wells passing, and then also you pointed out OG Howard Ashman's passing, Eisner going through his heart issues and his surgery, and then again with Pixar coming out and the Disney decade ending. I think everything was just kind of happening at once, and some things were for the good for one matter, but it ended up hurting in another.
Right. Yeah, it was a perfect storm of events, sort of, so to speak, which is interesting because it was a perfect storm of events that sort of bolstered Eisner and that whole era in the first 10 years. And then they had another perfect storm in the other direction, though, that started to bring that era down.
And honestly, aren't we really seeing that with Iger, too? It seems like history is repeating itself because it's like the first part of Iger's session, if you will, as CEO. Right. He did all those all those acquisitions with Marvel and Lucasfilm and even Pixar at the start of him being CEO, and then after a certain point it's like they kind of lose their footing, why they became CEO in the first place. And now I think that's why I feel like it is time for Iger to go. I think honestly once his contract is done in 2026, I think he's done. I personally think he should be done. Right. But they have to just not sugarcoat it and just put somebody in there like they did with Chapek just to fill the gap. And we did. Sorry, OG, I know I keep on. I'm passionate about this, man. Like I got a lot to say.
I'm probably going to do the same when you.
But we did talk about this before when I believe you asked the question, OG. Would I be okay with them bringing Eisner back as part of the board, especially what's been going on now with Peltz and trying to get multiple seats, not just one seat. He's going after Iger, not for 1, but 2 seats on the board. And I feel like, honestly, if they were to bring Eisner back, in a sense, I feel like that he still has that determination and tenacity that would actually help the company out if he had a seat on the board.
One thing I don't understand is it would be almost, I think it would be a smart business move, actually, to kind of maybe write that into the, what do they call that? The bylaws, I think it's called, where when a Disney CEO officially steps down, they get a seat on the board. Mm-hmm. I think that might be smart business practice, regardless of what you think of Eisner, regardless of what you think about Iger or any of these guys or gals, it would be kind of, I think it would be a good move to sort of have someone who ran the company before on the board to sort of help guide that ship. So that'd be super interesting, man. Matthew, your thoughts on this, kind of history repeating itself with Bob Iger?
It really does feel like at this point, Iger really is on his way out. At this point, I will admit that I did like Iger to a point. It felt like up until 2012 that everything was going absolutely fine, and even up until 2019, that was still true to an extent. But looking back over the last few years, it does feel like Iger has just he's reached the end of a road. He's just lost that energy.
Yeah,
And,
that
and,
happened.
and he's 72 for crying out loud.
I know, and people forget that, Matthew, right? Because he looks great. I mean, Bob Iger takes care of himself. He looks really good for 72, but he's getting older, and you can see it. He's tired. He's kind of run down now, So he's got to. We need some fresh blood in there. We need someone a little younger. We need someone who's got that energy, that passion to get in there and do something different. But this stuff, and this is what I've been trying to tell fans for a while now. This stuff is cyclical, and you touched upon it, George. This stuff is cyclical, where if you look at the history of the Walt Disney Company, it ebbs and flows, especially after Walt's passing. You'll see times of a downward trend, and then they kind of hit rock bottom, and then they come back up even stronger. Then they hit that downward trend again, and they come back up. This has been happening now for several decades. And now, look, it happened again. Bob Iger was here. He was crushing. He was hitting home run after home run. I mean, even Iger said the other day, they got used to, and it was expected for every Disney release in theaters to hit $1 billion. That's insane. Hitting $1 billion, even for just one movie a year, is a huge accomplishment. Mm-hmm. But it was expected for every Disney movie to do that because they were just hitting all these home runs. So they were going through a huge, period of time where they were just thriving. But now we're going through that cycle again. Now they're kind of kind of cycling on the bottom, and we'll get through it. I tell Matthew that all the time. I mean, we always talk about this stuff. All three of us. This is a low time, a transitional time, but it will go back up again like it always has. Absolutely. There's a lot of
pretty much inevitable.
It is, right, Matthew? Look, the company has been around for 100 years. 100 years, and it's likely going to be around for another 100 years. You're going to have downtimes. You're never going to have just endless wins. No company has ever done that. Even under Walt, the company wasn't like that. I mean, you had the animator strike and all kinds of drama during even Walt Disney's era. You even saw dips in quality under Walt's era. A lot of those package films, in my opinion, like Saludos Amigos and what was it? The Ichabod Crane and things like that. I mean, those movies were good. They were great, for sure. But I mean, are they honestly of the same quality of a Pinocchio or a Snow White?
Not.
Of course not. Exactly. Huge dip.
And yet it's still embedded in. Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew.
I was just going to say everything in between in like Bambi and Cinderella, everything in between those two films just didn't quite have the same charm or the same quality to them.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. They definitely did not have that same element to them, So it's going to be interesting. This is extremely transitional for the Walt Disney Company right now, and it's not just Disney. We say this all the time. It's the industry. Look, a lot of theaters, a lot of these movies going into theaters are not. There's a couple of gems here and there. You got Oppenheimer, you got Barbie, and Super Mario. But a lot of these movies are not doing what they did pre-Pandy, and it's not just Disney. And so we're going through this real transitional time right now. Streaming really disrupted the market. It really did. It didn't kill the theaters, but the theater industry is definitely limping, in my opinion, despite there being a few gems here and there. So, but question to you, Matthew. Now, look, let's say they reinstate the president position. Let's just say Bob Iger's like, you know what? I need to have some checks to my power. I want to have like a number 2. So they reinstate the president position at the Walt Disney Company. In your opinion, right now, if he were to do that, who would you pick?
I would probably say either Tom Staggs or Kevin Mayer, and then once Iger's contract is finished, select either Mayer or Staggs thereafter.
That's brilliant. That's exactly where my head was going. What about you, George?
That's the same as mine. Like I would, and honestly, I would even say having the two of them together. Having Staggs and Mayer. Again, I feel like that the Walt Disney Company does really well. If we really look at through the history of the first 100 years, you have Walt and Roy, you have Eisner and Wells. It just seems like when they have two people running this multi-billion-dollar empire of a company, things kind of, I'm not saying it goes smooth all the time, right, but you have less of a rocky path than when it's just run by one person. Right. And I will say too that when you mentioned like all the movies like back in Walt's time and everything, that there were some movies that didn't do so hot, because of the war, because of the strike or what have you, and yet that is now embedded in Disney history. people still talk about it. People still watch it on documentaries, on, things on Disney Plus, on the Imagineering story. There was a lot of ups and downs that we had touched upon with Disneyland Paris, with
Right.
the Asian parks when they had those really bad earthquake and tsunamis and all that. Disney tackled a lot of obstacles and challenges and ups and downs, but it became part of the core history that even though it was horrible to go through and deal with at the time, but then when you go back and you say, oh, that was interesting, that's right, I remember when that happened, or I didn't know this was going on. But it's funny how Walt got through those obstacles, and he was so determined and everything. That's just like how we're going through now. It sucks right now. We're going through it. We have to go through it. But in order to get past it, we just kind of have to just kind of grind our teeth and schlov through it. And then when it does, it becomes part of the Disney history.
Well, yeah, it becomes part of Disney history. And then you have that IP, even if it doesn't do necessarily bonkers at the box office, you have that IP in the catalog forever. And you can utilize that IP any way you want going forward. So we've seen this before. Look, even in the new 100th anniversary fireworks show at Disneyland, Wondrous Journeys, shout out to Christopher Lenertz, who's absolutely brilliant. That show is incredible. But even in that show, you see one of the coolest parts in that show was a clip from Treasure Planet, a movie that was notoriously a massive flop for the Walt Disney Company, for Disney Animation, brought back 20 years later-ish, and utilized in a fireworks show. So even a movie like Wish, let's just say it doesn't rebound. Let's just say even on Disney Plus, it doesn't do well. Now you have that character, that cute little star, and Asha, these great characters that you can utilize in future things. Maybe it's not a fireworks show, maybe it's something else, but you can utilize the stuff going forward. So,
and honestly, with The Princess and the Frog, when it first opened, that movie didn't do so hot. A lot of the times it came out and it was like a forgotten thing. And then all of a sudden they started incorporating Tiana and Naveen in the parades. They had the meet and greets with Tiana. Now they have like Tiana's palace, and where they added her on the Disney Wonder on the cruise ship. And now they added her in Disneyland with the Tiana's place, and then we're going to have the Bayou Adventure at both Walt Disney World and Disneyland. So Tiana and the Princess and the Frog franchise has come a long way since it premiered back in 2009. So that's almost like 13, 14 years that it has taken for people to really give Tiana her credibility. And it could be the same thing with Asha and Wish.
That's a great point. Yeah, that movie was not a huge home run success at all at the box office when it premiered in 2009, right?
2009.
It just wasn't, and a lot of people actually kind of blame that movie for like Disney kind of giving up on 2D animation. Now, I don't necessarily think that's fair, to be honest, but I mean, that really was a lot of people's stance, is that like if that movie would have done better, they probably would have stuck with the hand drawn. But it's crazy. Now, Matthew, I want to ask you this question, brother. Like, because you've been watching the Wish box office. It's not good. I mean, look, I was saying like a opening weekend, it might be slow, but it might pick up the next weekend. Maybe it'll have some legs. It doesn't appear that's the case. It looks like this weekend is pretty bad too, to be honest with you. In your opinion, Matthew, what can Disney do to get back on track with these animated films? What do they need to do?
I would say at this point that fresh blood is just desperately needed.
Fresh blood. So would you? So okay. So would you bring Lasseter back, or would you think you should bring someone in totally different?
Maybe bring someone else different rather than just relying on former talent.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not forget, we have seen those. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we have seen those allegations against Lasseter.
We have. No, we absolutely have. We have seen those allegations. And, he's been let go, fired from the Disney company, I think twice now. So at this point, I don't think he would ever come back anyway, because he would always be like looking over his shoulder, like, am I going to be fired again? 3 times the charm, So even without the allegations, I don't think he would be interested in it. I think it's happened too many times now. But you're right. There is the allegations. I think that you have to also be cognizant of that, and see. But what about you, George? What do you think they can do to kind of improve this animation division? Because, I mean, I don't know. Is it even Disney's?
No, I was just going to say it. I was just going to say it, bro. I honestly, at this point, I feel like it is really not on Disney's shoulders of what they're doing right or wrong. I think right now they kind of had a little bump in the road just with any of their films, that kind of was leaning more towards like a specific demographic of an audience for specific reasonings. But I think Disney is kind of getting out of that. But because they had that short amount of time frame, people just got so used to it, and they're saying, okay, here comes another woke movie by Disney, here comes another problematic film by Disney. So it's like they're already putting it in their minds that's what they're going to get without even seeing the movie.
Right.
And I feel like it's like Disney kind of shot themselves in the foot, but at the same time, I think moving forward now, I think Disney is kind of getting back on that track. But I feel like it's the audience, it's the people, it's the fans that are just not kind of letting their guard down and really taking these films for what they really are. Because I saw Wish in theaters, and I absolutely loved it.
A lot of people have.
It felt
yeah.
core. It felt core Disney animation to me.
A lot of people are coming out of that theater saying that. I've retweeted a few things today, and not because I'm a shill. I know a lot of, I'm sure there's people that like on Twitter that follow me and like, oh, look at this shill retweeting all the positive reviews for Wish. I'm retweeting the positive reviews for Wish because the world is retweeting the negative ones. So I'm bringing balance to the force, right? But in all seriousness, though, I mean, I think it's important, though, to get that out there a little bit because I do see a good amount of people loving this movie, including yourself, George. So, hey, and if someone doesn't want to see it still, that's fine. Yeah. But, it should still be out there that, people are enjoying this stuff,
You're Obi-Wan, OG. You're taking the high ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Really quick, I have a question. I have a question for it. Now, OG, I think you were the one that... Were you the one that tweeted it, or you answered a tweet? But does anybody really know what happened to Ken Rice?
Oh, you mean Peter Rice?
No, Peter Rice, not Ken Rice. Excuse me, Peter Rice.
Do you know, Matthew? Have you heard anything about Peter Rice?
No, I haven't heard anything at all. Although the most recent thing I heard was a year and a half ago when he was let go by Disney. Haven't heard anything else beyond that.
That was I did tweet about that, George, and it was interesting because it was like when Chapek fired him, Hollywood was like clutching their pearls, like, oh my gosh, how could you fire the Peter Rice?
Yeah.
He's such a treasure, he's an amazing mind, and this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, cool, okay, that's fine. But you would think that if like he was this great talent and this brilliant, executive or whatever, like some other studio would have snatched him up or something. I haven't really heard much about that. That's interesting. And interesting too is Bob Iger didn't reach out. He's been back for a year now. He didn't try to bring that guy back in. So
it's almost like the children's book, like Where's Waldo? It's like Where's Peter?
Where's Peter? Does anyone know where Peter is? Come on. Yeah, it's wild, absolutely wild. Now, Matthew, I want to ask you a question. We've talked a lot, brother, about we've done a few videos now on this where it's like the messaging with Disney, right? The wokeness, as people call it out there. Iger came out the other day, Matthew, and said, we got to get back to entertaining people and putting the messaging on the back burner. What was your takeaway from that comment from Bob Iger?
I think he really does mean it this time. Some people will just some people might just brush it off and saying he's just clutching at straws at this point, but I don't think he is.
No, I would agree. I think he understands the severity of the situation. I think he feels like that it has hurt them. I agree with you, Matthew. I think there is legitimacy to that. And this isn't the first time he's kind of said that. A couple of these quarterly earnings calls, he said he understands they need to be more cognizant of parents' comfort level. It's not the same across the whole country or even around the world. A family in Los Angeles, they're going to have a different sort of mindset, so to speak, than a family in rural Montana, right? And I think Iger has sort of addressed that, where it's like they're trying to balance that, and try to be a little bit more.
And that's why you have to have content exactly that it really doesn't speak one side or the other. You just keep it. That's where you don't go the high ground, you go the middle ground. Just for everybody, and it's like that way. It's not ruffling feathers one side or the other.
Yeah. I think there was a lot of that kind of, the whole thing with the repeal of the bill and that whole thing, and there was a lot of messaging out there. Now, that doesn't mean I think a lot of fans are sort of taking it to the extreme, right? Where people are saying, well, you got to have some sort of message in a movie. What's the point of having the movie? He's not saying that you can't have like a message, like a good message, like pretty much every Disney movie has. I think what he's talking about is we lead with story, we lead with entertaining, and then we figure out maybe a good message in there, but it's not the priority. We're not leading with the message. We're leading with the entertainment value, and then we go from there. So I think that's kind of like perfect example, honestly, is Tiana's Bayou Adventure, right? That was definitely like, okay, kind of leading with message, to be fair. And look, I'm very bullish on this ride. I do think that it's going to surprise people. I think it'll be decent. I think it's going to be better than people think. But to be fair, the ride didn't come from like an Imagineer waking up in the middle of the night with an epiphany for this amazing story they can put in this attraction. It was done because the original source material was seen as problematic. So let's fit something in there to replace it. So it was kind of leading with messaging and not necessarily entertaining.
Okay. And I actually have a question for you guys, and this is a spicy one.
Uh-oh. Matthew, you ready for a spicy one?
Being that Iger is now kind of realizing for that notion of what you just said, OG.
Right.
Do you feel like if everything was kind of left untouched leading up to this point, could we have seen Splash Mountain not touched?
What do you think, Matthew? I'll start with you, brother.
In my humblest of opinion, things may have still turned out the same.
Oh, that's
because I don't think that viewpoint applied specifically to Iger. There was already some tensions over the ride near the end of the Eisner era.
That's a good point that Matthew makes here. I really want to emphasize that too, and not just with the attraction. A lot of people pin this whole Song of the South thing on Bob Iger being woke, and it's true. Like, I mean, like obviously he was in charge when they decide to retheme it, and they've been kicking that idea around for a few years, like Matthew was saying. But even before Bob, Matthew was absolutely right. Even before Bob, it was Michael Eisner who stopped releasing it on VHS. He put it permanently in the vault. It wasn't Bob Iger. That was long before Bob Iger. Mm-hmm. So this whole thing has sort of been a taboo thing at Disney for a long, long time. So Matthew's right. I mean, that, what do you think, George?
I actually agree with him. I feel like that it was a buildup that was just kind of occurring over the years, and I feel like due to certain unfortunate events, of stuff going on in 2020, that it just brought it to a head, and it was like that was the tipping point. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And it's like, what? Before this gets any further down the rabbit hole, so to speak, no pun intended, then it could already go. It's like, what? Let's just kind of end this now, and let's kind of showcase that we, us as a company, we aren't racist, we aren't prejudiced. So in order to do that, let's showcase this ride by using a character in a positive way, which would be Tiana, because she was the very first African-American princess. So it's like, okay, so let's utilize that. Let's let that be our platform to create this new story for this attraction.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, Matthew, I want to ask you another question about Bob Iger. So the other day, he also said that the Marvels ended up failing because there wasn't enough supervision on that movie. Like, I guess like it was during the pandemic, and there wasn't enough executive supervision on that movie. Do you buy that? Do you think that was the problem, or where do you stand with that?
There probably is some truth to that because of Chapek.
Yeah, and a lot of fans too. I think a lot of fans are kind of misinterpreting that comment too, because like, I mean, look, when he says, I think when Bob Iger says executive supervision, I think he means like a Feige. Like, people forget Feige is an executive. Like Iger isn't necessarily talking about like someone from like the board supervising the Marvels or some like suit like through and through like a finance person, right? I think what Iger was talking about were people like Kevin Feige. And I think that's the thing that fans even were concerned about. I watch Josh from Den of Nerds. Shout out to Josh from Den of Nerds. I give him a shout out all the time because I love this guy. He's fantastic. But he has made this over like for the past year, where is Feige spread too thin? He's got too many projects in the pipeline with movies and Disney Plus. Is he spread too thin? So I think what Iger was basically saying, and I could be misinterpreting, but this is how I kind of took it, was that due to the pandemic and due to so much stuff on like their plate, that Feige was kind of spread too thin. He couldn't be more hands-on with that project. And I think that kind of ties in too with the firing of Victoria Alonso, who, when Feige is spread too thin, she's stepping in and making decisions. And obviously a lot of the decisions she made were not good. So that whole thing kind of ties together full circle. But what do you think that meant, George, in terms of like, you know, the supervision or lack of it could create an issue for the Marvels?
Yeah, I feel like during the time with production, as it was mentioned, that if it was filmed, I don't know like when production started on that. I don't know if it was like early 21, late 20. I'm not 100% sure, but obviously it would have had to be during the time when, you know, the world still was like in shambles over the pandy and the shutdown and what have you, you know, trying to, you know, finagle a lot of production, because I'm assuming, you know, when they started the production back up, you know, they had to figure out different ways how to film, how to, you know, with locations and what have you. And then also too, as with Feige, I just think that there was a lot on his plate where there's like, again, yeah, because I think Marvel and Lucasfilm have like two opposite ends of how they're running their company. Marvel is like everything's out at once. Lucasfilm, we're not getting enough. So
Right.
it's like with so much going on, it just feels like that the Marvels was coming out at like it's at like at the right place but the wrong time, so to speak. Where, because I seen the Marvels, I'm not gonna say it was absolutely phenomenal. By all means, it was not up to like the traditional Marvel, like the cinematic universe that we're used to. But I mean, it was a decent film. I can't
Right.
say I completely hated it, but I mean, it wasn't like the highest, you know, top tier Marvel film by all means.
It wasn't Captain America Winter Soldier is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. Well, Matthew, it's always a pleasure having you on, man. Always a pleasure. We love you, Matthew. You're always welcome back. We'll have you on again very, very soon. But any final comments, Matthew, before we take off?
No, not really.
No. All right. Well, I'll link his Instagram in the description down below. And the reason why I'm doing that is because there's a lot of numbers in there. So it's easier probably just to click on it. So I will link it in the description. Make sure you follow Matthew. He is part of the OG 55 family, and a lot of amazing insight from Matthew, and especially on the corporate end of things, really passionate Disney fan. So make sure you check him out on Instagram. And George, the Italiano, if you could let everybody at home know where they could find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You could find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for talking shop with me. And Matthew, a special thank you to you, because I know for everybody at home that doesn't know, Matthew's actually in the UK. So there is a time difference there. So it's late for him. It's later for him. So Matthew, we always appreciate you when you come on, because we do understand that time difference. So again, thank you so much for taking time to do this, man. And thank you all so much for watching. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we talked about. The amazing Frank Wells, Michael Eisner, Bob Iger, animation, Wish, box office, everything. We'd love to hear from you down below. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Orange Nerd Show.